Karen, thank you for joining me again. So we're here to talk about finances in dentistry. Um, but obviously, the phrase on everyone's lips at the moment is the cost of living crisis, and it's impacting all of us in different ways. How is it impacting dentistry at the moment?
It's impacting dentistry in a couple of ways, Seb, in that it's impacting the individuals who work within the dentistry profession as like us. They're seeing their energy bills going up, they're seeing their food bills going up. But it's also impacting the practices and the principals as well, because the cost of running the practice is going up. So that is a real tough one for the guys working in the NHS, because their income is fixed. So a lot of these costs, energy costs, having the heating and the lighting on, the cost of consumables as well is going up. They have to absorb all of those costs. So if it's a 100% NHS practice, as I say, their income is set from the outset of the tax year. Whereas if there is an element of private, sometimes those costs can be passed on to patients, or they can be built into the cost of their services, which they have a lot more flexibility and control over. What we have seen as well, and those practices that are faring a little bit better, are those ones that have got payment plans. So they've got a regular income coming in from a payment plan that supports their patients as well. So the patients are not having to fork out large amounts of money in one go, which could be difficult on a monthly basis when they're also considering their cost of living increases. It's just a regular direct debit, so that's a bit of a win-win situation for people. But for everybody overall, there's three big key factors that's impacting everybody. So one is inflation, which is at an all-time high and still increasing. There's the energy bills, which are unprecedented. I mean, I've just had a message from my energy provider saying my energy bill's going to go from 2,000 to 4,000 a year with the cap rise. But if I wanted to fix it for stability and peace of mind, I can fix it at £8,000 a year. So, that's a little bit worrying if that sort of communication is going to be coming out to people. And then there's also the low interest rate. So while you're borrowing, that is great. But for people with savings, it's not so great. So there's a few things that people can look at is one, make sure you've got the lowest possible rate on any borrowing or any lending that you've got. So whether that's a credit card that you can move on to 0%, whether it's your mortgage or whether it's your commercial lending. Just because you've been with somebody long term, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is still the best rate on the marketplace, and we can help you by looking into that for you and letting you know what is out there. And then the other thing is looking at your savings. Are your savings doing what you need them to do? Because £20,000 now is not going to be worth £20,000 in 10 years' time. And that's the impact of inflation on people's savings plans and on people's pensions. So there is quite a bit to have a look at that Wesleyan or the individuals themselves can do, but we're certainly here to help. There's not a lot we can do about the increased energy and the bills. It's just try and manage that effectively. Turn off lights that don't need to be on. It's all the usual stuff, the stuff that you think is so simple, but can help. It's like you can get these little meters and they tell you how much energy an appliance is using. And we had like an old freezer in our garage and it was costing £25 a month. So we just turned it off,
Yep.
emptied it out and turned it off.
Yep.
Because that might not sound like a lot, but over the course of the year, that's another £300 you've just saved.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, Karen. So is there, aside from, I mean, obviously, people can't renegotiate with the NHS to improve their contracts.
No.
So really, the solution or the best thing to do is to speak to a financial advisor and get some advice that way.
It is, yes. So it's for us to check to make sure that financially everything you've got is absolutely the best policy for you. So make sure you've got the lowest rate on your lending, make sure you're getting the best rate on your savings, also that you've got protection for yourself as well. So if anything happens, you can continue to pay those bills. Yes, there's not a lot we can do about the NHS, but it might be that you start to look at alternatives. So do you want to pick up a few days private work? And I've had a few conversations like that where it's also helped with the client's work-life balance. So at the minute, the NHS is a bit of a treadmill that you see in patient after patient quite quickly. That can get demoralising, that can affect your well-being and your mental health. But if you could take a step back and maybe go, right, okay, well, I'll do 3 days NHS and 2 days private. Those 2 days private can potentially give you more income from less patients in not such a rapid turnover environment, which then can reinvigorate that person and help them start enjoying the job again, which then also impacts on your mental health. And you know, anything that you can do to make your work-life balance better has got to be a positive.
Yeah, absolutely. So Karen, the last time we spoke, we touched on the key financial concerns for female dentists, which is Wesleyan's recent survey. And that showed that less female dentists are confident about their financial future when compared to male dentists. So is this a crisis that is disproportionately impacting female dentists over male dentists?
Not necessarily, Seb. I think it's more the fact that the female dentists tend to have gaps in their career which can impact them financially in the future. So they might take maternity leave. You know, generally the females will go down to work part-time to support childcare arrangements, or they might have to take time off to look after elderly relatives. So those are things not, you know, necessarily specific to the females, but we do see that is a greater impact to the ladies than it is to the male population of dentists. But it's more the fact that only 24% of our female dentists are confident they have actually planned for the future, whereas 41% of the male population have actually done some planning. So it's just about education and about reviews and looking for the best options you can get for your money, basically. And that's where we can help. You know, you can have an obligation chat with your Wesleyan advisor if you're concerned about the fact that the savings rates are at an all-time low, or you might not necessarily know what's happening with your NHS pension. So we can do reviews on that. So the earlier you start, the better, because you've got a longer timeline to put these concerns to bed. And I would always say just keep an eye on things. If you've got medium or long-term goals, review them every year, especially the way the cost of living increases and inflation is going at the moment. You might need to tweak those plans. So it's great, put your plans in place to start with, but please don't forget about them.
Well, I mean,
because
on that, sorry, Karen, on that note, is it disproportionately affecting people of different generations? Because obviously people with older generations, their plans are a bit more short term.
Yeah, they are, but what we've seen is not necessarily for the older generation, because they've had that timeline, they've had the time to get the savings behind them. A lot of older dentists are in a very comfortable position, the mortgages might be paid off. What I am seeing at the moment is a lot of concern about the younger dentists and the students coming through. In that specifically the students don't feel like they've got enough support. There was, I don't know if you've looked at the BDA Benevolent Fund, they've done a little piece on some research to ask the students how they felt about being supported, and a lot of them, it's impacting the mental health as well, where they might drop out of their studies because they're concerned about money. So where it can impact the younger dentists is, especially if it's not their first degree, it might be the second degree. So then they've got twice as much student debt that they might be concerned about. It might be that they don't have the family support financially that some dentists have. It may be that they have, they might be older students that have come into it at a later date and they've got existing financial commitments that they're worried about. And I think it's because the cost of living's going up, while you're studying, your grants haven't gone up, they're not changing, so a lot of the student dentists, they're having to take on extra work while they're studying,
Yeah,
and that's having a massive impact on their mental health.
yeah,
Then when they're starting to work as a newly qualified dentist, a lot of them stay in rented accommodation. They might stay in the area where they did the university degree. So if there is a concern, there are things that the younger dentists can do, and I have seen this increase over the last year or so, where they've migrated back home again, because it is cheaper,
yeah,
and it might not be something that you want to do after being, standing on your own 2 feet while you're at university, to then go back to them with your parents, but it might just give you that stopgap if you're training for 1 or 2 years, just to start and build some finances behind yourself. Also, that emotional support is there for you as well.
yeah.
And then to start getting back, out there, whether it's renting or getting onto the property ladder. But main thing is to talk to each other,
Okay.
and talk to your advisor if you've got any concerns. That's exactly what we're here for.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question that is on a lot of principals' lips is, should I spend or should I save? The competition between practices has increased, so a lot of principals are feeling the pressure to spend. Is now the right time to spend, or is now the right time to save that money?
Yeah, that's a bit of a tricky one. I think it really depends on the practice and what competition you've got. So if you've taken over a practice recently and maybe it hasn't been modernised for a while, then that would be a good time to probably spend, because there are a lot more patients willing to pay for private dentistry, because there's an awful lot of people that can't get on the NHS lists, because everybody's so busy and so full. So if you've got a practice and you've got a lot of competition around you, and that practice maybe like I say, you've just taken over and it's not quite up to scratch, then it may be a good idea to invest in that so you're not left behind with your peers. It is also a good idea to save, and there are options now for dental practices to actually access investments rather than just relying on savings accounts and savings rates, which is something that we've introduced over the last couple of years, and that hasn't been there for a lot of limited companies or partnerships in the past. So we've acknowledged that practices do like to save long term, but balance it between what you want to do long term and what you want to do short term. So like an individual, we always say, have your medium and long term plans and review them. Same applies for a dental practice. What do you want to do in the next 5 years? Do you want to convert to 100% private? Or do you want to stay 100% NHS? Do you want to do a mix of the two?
Yeah.
If you do convert, do you have to look at additional equipment that you need? So you might introduce Invisalign or something like that. So you've got, it's really individual to each practice, but it's having that conversation and thinking about where you want to take your practice. And sometimes it's a good idea to have a chat with somebody disconnected from your business altogether, because they might see an opportunity that you can't because you're too close to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same kind of question for those dentists that are looking to purchase a practice. Are dental practices still viable now? Is now a good time to purchase the practice?
Yeah, it really is actually, yes, because throughout the pandemic, the dental practices have really held their own, partly because of the support from the NHS, which enabled a lot of people to continue working and continue to be able to be paid. A lot of places stepped up as emergency centres as well, but they have really held their own. So yeah, if it's something that you want to do, it puts you more in control of your finances as well. So if you're working as an associate in a dental practice and that practice doesn't offer a private offering, and you might think there's so much opportunity there, well, that's an ideal situation. If that practice comes up for sale, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can make those changes. The waiting lists for people needing dental treatment is huge, so I can't see there being a slowdown in business either. I can only see it escalating, and there was another article I read, I'll just check my notes, dentalnursing.co.uk. What they found was 1 in 3 people haven't been to the dentist in the last 2 years because of money concerns. If that's the case, when they do go to the dentist, they're going to need more treatment. The other thing as well is 1 in 4 or a quarter of parents will prioritise their children's oral health over their own. So again, we might have kids with fantastic oral health, but the parents are going to be suffering. So yeah, I think it is a good time as long as it's right for you, because there is a lot involved with buying a dental practice. And there is it's quite a steep learning curve, but there's an awful lot of support out there. And as I said, the value of the practices are holding their own. Yeah, it's a good time to buy.
So how do you think all this will impact dentists' pensions?
It can impact dentist pensions 2 ways, in a positive way and a negative way. So the negative way is obviously with inflation, your money in the future won't be worth what it's worth now. So if you've got £20,000 now and you go forward 10 years, you're not going to be able to buy the same amount of things with £20,000 in 10 years' time. So you need to make sure that your pensions are on track to do what you want them to do and that they're keeping up with inflation. And the best thing to do is to review them, especially if you have a mix of NHS and private work as well. If you're drifting more towards private work, that can have a detrimental impact on your retirement plans, in that there's less money going into your NHS pension. So you might need to put alternative plans in place for there. So yeah, so buying power of your money will go down as inflation goes up. So we need to make sure that those plans are still on track. On the flip side of it, the NHS do actually increase the pension every year in line with the Consumer Price Index, which means as the Consumer Price Index goes up, the increases to the pension go up.
Okay.
So that is really good, but that again has also had a negative impact on some high earners, where they've ended up with an additional tax charge on their annual allowance. So that is something to keep an eye on. If you've got quite a substantial NHS pension and you've got a substantial income, you could end up having a tax bill for the next couple of years, purely because the CPI or the Consumer Price Index is so high at the moment.
And I guess I assume the best thing to work out where you stand on that is to speak to your financial advisor.
Speak to your financial advisor and speak to your accountant, because there's things that your accountant can do to mitigate some of that tax. There are things that you can request from the NHS to put you in an informed position. So one is your total rewards statement off the NHS Total Rewards website. And 2, if you think you might have exceeded your annual allowance, ask the NHS for an annual allowance statement. When you get that, give that to your accountant.
Okay.
And they'll see if there's any tax breaks from previous years that they can use.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Karen. That's all the questions I've got. Is there anything else that you'd just like to highlight? We're in quite a turbulent time. Is there anything you just wanted to point out?
Yeah, it will settle down at some point. I know it is worrying at the moment. Like I said to you, when I got that message of my gas supplier saying, "Oh, we can fix your bill for you, but it'll only cost you £8,000 a year," I'm thinking, no. So I know you can't move your bills around between energy suppliers, but it's just being conscious of what you've got on in the house and in your business. Do certain lights need to be on? Even just leaving equipment on standby overnight, turn everything off, turn it all off at the sockets, and just try and reduce the amount of energy that you use. And realistically, not so that it's to your own detriment. We don't want anybody doing that, like not putting the heating on or anything like that. Making sure that you've got your lowest possible rates, because there are some fantastic rates around at the moment for borrowing. So whether that is credit cards, personal loans, mortgages or commercial borrowing, have a look at those, review those with your advisor to make sure that you have got the lowest rates that are available. And then on the flip side is make sure that your savings are doing what you want them to do and your pension's doing what you want them to do, and just reviewing them. That's all we can do, and it's just keeping an eye on it, on things. And if you've got any concerns whatsoever, talk to us.
Absolutely.
You know, please don't worry about things, because this will impact your mental health. And it could just be that somebody from the outside looking at it with a fresh pair of eyes can maybe see a solution. So yeah, just ask, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
we'll be happy to help.
Perfect, Karen. Thank you so much for your time as always. And
It's a
it's
pleasure.
been enlightening. Thank you for speaking to it.
Yeah, nice to see you again, Seb. Thanks.